You've done the points, you've added moxa, maybe you've even done Shonishin or bloodletting. But when your patient comes back next week, the treatment didn't hold. If this is you, don't worry, you're not alone. And oftentimes I see that TCM practitioners are not utilizing the wrong tools, but more so that their diagnostics are not giving them a clear image of what's happening for the patient on the table today. So in today's video, I want to break down how to really combine your diagnostic theory and to help you be more effective in clinic with traditional Japanese medicine with fewer needles and more confidence. If this sounds super exciting to you, I would love to continue the conversation and learn what's really holding you back in your practice. Let's set up a chat and talk about your goals and how to help you achieve them. There's a link for that in the description box below. Hi everyone, my name is Maya Suzuki, and I actually didn't train in a TCM school. The school I trained at, Toyo ShinKyu Senmon Gakko, was based in traditional Japanese medicine. And the style that I've since been truly dedicating my practice to, called Iashi no Michi, is also based in traditional Japanese medicine theory, technique, and diagnostics. And what I see as a huge difference between the practice I was initially taught and the practice TCM practitioners are taught in school is that diagnostics in TCM are based off theory and symptoms. However, diagnostics in traditional Japanese medicine are based off palpation and the combination of all of the theories together, that's meridians, zongfu, point location, and possibly even herbal theories, to create an overarching 3D image of the body. This is of course backed up with our palpation, and then point location is specified through what's actually the body is telling us. So if you're ready to really change your diagnostics and have it be based on the feedback system of the body rather than a book, then stay tuned, we're going to get all into it. So in TCM-trained schools, you're often taught the pulse and the tongue. These are extremely effective ways of diagnosing the client. The pulse, of course, is going to give us a real-time image, a snapshot of what's happening in that exact moment for the patient. And the tongue, of course, is going to give us a broad spectrum understanding of what's happening not only in comparison to the pulse, but also in the zongfu. And I really love that you can do a feedback loop between the two of them and compare and contrast. Now, the problem with both of these diagnostic skills are, with the pulse, it changes when the person sneezes. So if that person is scared off on your table, or if they just had a coffee, their pulse is going to change. And with the tongue, we also now have lovely things like tongue scrapers, and if you drink coffee, obviously it changes the color. So sometimes the tongue is not as accurate, and also medication can really affect both of these quite drastically. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in our third diagnostic method in order to get more comparison. So I would really love for you first to look at the pulse, and if you're interested in really having an understanding of the pulse, and if you're like, I'm still confused on the pulse, I have a lot of videos on this channel on how to really simplify the pulse. So I'll go ahead and link those in the description box below, and then possibly up here as well, and you can search for those on my channel. The pulse doesn't have to be hard, it just needs to be consistent, and that's really, really important. So we're going to look at the pulse, and then we're going to compare it to the tongue. And then we're going to look at what's called the hara, or the abdominal diagnosis. So let's say, for example, on the pulse, that the spleen pulse was deficient. Now, right here, you're going to be noticing a huge difference between your TCM and your traditional Japanese medicine. In TCM, oftentimes we're looking for the most excess of the pulses because TCM is often based on excess rather than deficiency. And that's going to be a huge difference for almost all, if not all, traditional Japanese medicine styles, and that we're really focusing on the deficiency of the body first. So from the deficiency really comes the illness. Then the next thing we're going to look is at the tongue. So for example, does the tongue have tooth depressions or teeth depressions? Is it swollen? Is there perhaps some white or gray in the center of the tongue? Things like that that might verify a spleen deficiency, or also water toxin or damp in the body that could indicate spleen deficiency. So really great is when you have two diagnostic methods that check off and are the same, and then you can move on to the third. Now, what becomes really confusing is when these are different. Now, when we go down to the hara, and again, I have a lot of videos on here explaining the hara, my tradition's diagnostic method for the hara. There's a few different ones, so you can check that out. Then we would go on to the hara, and let's say, for example, we found that there was deficiency around REN 12, right? And then also we can say that their symptomology, maybe they're not, maybe they have morning sickness and they're not able to eat. So we can then double check everything that's happening with the pulse, the tongue, the hara, and the symptoms. Now, again, what I said, what can be confusing is when these give different diagnostic results. And in that case, you always want to take the hara over all others. That's a very common saying in traditional Japanese medicine, that the hara is queen, she knows best. And that's just simply because, again, the pulse and the tongue, pulse can change very quickly and the tongue can change very, very easily in comparison, again, to the abdomen. So this is the order in which you're going to do your diagnosis. And perhaps before this, you might even add in that you're asking your questions and things like that as well. Once we understand the overarching image of what's happening with the patient, we can then really start dialing in how we're going to approach and then start to understand those diagnostic results. So let's get into that. Before I go any further, I would love to know if you're interested in learning traditional Japanese medicine and what's holding you back from doing so. Let me know in the comments below. All right, so let's really start to combine this information we're getting and get an overall global image of what's happening with the body. So the first thing that we want to do again is we've compared that our tongue, our pulse, and perhaps our abdomen are all matching up together. Then, if you know herbs, you can take it a step further and really start to understand the herbs and then start to get an overarching image of what to do with the body. So let's talk about that really quick. Now, if you don't understand herbs, I would highly suggest just hanging out and listening and see if maybe it can spark something for you to start an herbal study. I do want to put a disclaimer that I am not an herbal master. And also, this is going to be a little bit general, so there's a lot more that goes into this, and I just want you all to understand that we're just doing this for a quick demonstration. So let's say that our patient has spleen deficiency and also their tongue is showing similar signs and their abdomen is showing similar signs. And we decide that overall they have a Guizhou Jia Xiaoyou tongue. So what does that actually mean for what we're supposed to be seeing on the abdomen? Now, this is where I really start loving Kampo because it helps to really direct and help you to understand your acupuncture. So we know with our Guizhou that we're going to have some deficiency, more than likely, in the lower jiao. And that deficiency is allowing the healthy qi to actually rise up and create our symptomology. If you study the Hashang Hanlun, this is what we would see in our standard Guizhou tongue presentation. So we're going to be seeing our rising up of energy, and then we also see that we have Xiaoyou. Xiaoyou is going to be creating contracture of the rectus abdominis muscles. So based on what we're seeing on the abdomen, we again can go back to the tongue and start to really understand if our tongue is accurately demonstrating what's happening in the body. Now, as I stated before, even if our pulse and tongue do not line up with the hara, we're still going to believe the hara over all of those diagnostic methods. But how does this really help you to tune in and understand what exactly is happening for the patient instead of just going off their symptoms? Well, this kind of patient is often going to be complaining of having tight neck and shoulders. This patient, when they're not sick, right, is going to be quite deficient as a patient. And this patient, when they're not sick, is going to have this ropey contracture of the muscles as well. So we can start seeing how we can see both the patient when they're not sick and when they are sick and what symptoms might occur. Now, if we do see this on the abdomen, we can then start guessing about what's the best technique that we can use for that patient. What are the correct tools to use on them today? So we can guess to be using our Goshin, or our filiform needles, right? The needles that most of us use in practice to really tonify the lower jiao, or perhaps where that deficiency is presenting. We could also do a needle top moxa, or we could do half grain tonifying moxa. We have a lot of choices in order to mimic what the Guizhou is doing. With this, we're also going to want to address the shoulder and neck tension that's happening because of the Guizhou in this formula. Then we're also going to want to, as the Xiaoyou is doing, help to relax the muscle contracture of the rectus abdominis muscles. Now we can do this not only through point location, but we can also do this through local treatments. So we have a lot of choices there. Now, what comes up next is really the fun part, and that's combining your meridians, your Zhang Fu, your point location theory, and your herbal theory. So the very first thing, let's talk about, now that we understand what's happening with the herbal theory, what meridians would be affected, and therefore which meridians should we be thinking about the most. Now, of course, if this was here in the middle jiao, we could be thinking about the lung. And also, if because of the connection of the lung and how it connects down, we could still consider the lung. We can also consider things like the small intestine as it's going through the upper back and creating a lot of that muscle contracture. We can, of course, consider the spleen and the kidneys. These are, of course, really important meridians, and maybe even the liver meridian. So we have a lot of choices. Saying that, the gallbladder channel, maybe not our best choice. And also, if we think about it, the pericardium might not be our best choice simply because of its internal pathways, but it might be as well. It kind of depends on what emotional symptomologies that they're having. Obviously, with the bladder channel, we definitely can choose the bladder channel because the bladder channel is encompassing of all the meridians. We just have to find the correct corresponding point on the bladder channel. So now that we understand the channels that we're going to use, now we can start thinking about the point selection, right? And in TCM, you often have points that are, for example, are going to tonify the prenatal chi, or are going to relax the muscles, or are going to help with water, or stagnant water, or blood stasis. So you can think of those and then also think of their location on the related meridians and make sure that that point is actually going to be in tune with what's physically presenting on that patient. And of course, what's their goal for the day? That's a whole other subject. So we've really quickly run through not only what's happening with the Zhang Fu, we've understood that perhaps their spleen, more than likely in this situation also kidney deficient, right? We've seen what's happening on the tongue. Perhaps they have some grayness in the center. Perhaps they're showing signs of water toxin. More than likely the situation, we're showing signs of spleen and kidney deficiency really on the tongue. And then on the abdomen, we're seeing that we have this muscle contracture, we have deficiency, perhaps we have that neck and shoulder tension, and perhaps the muscle contracture along the paraspinals on the back in relation to the muscle contracture of the rectus abdominis. So we know that we have our Zhang Fu orientation, we have our meridians, we have our actual physical muscle orientation as well, which muscle groups we want to use, which local places we want to use, and then of course with the meridians, which distal, and then we can utilize all of that to decide which points would probably be the best to affect this area. Now, our last and final step is always going to be trying to find a live point. Now, a live point is a little bit more of a complicated explanation, but it's going to feel reactive to your fingertips. So oftentimes when people energetically feel pulled towards a point or pushed away from a point, that's a point literally saying it's excess or deficient. And those are going to be your most beneficial, most effective points to be using in treatment. But you can see how I've kind of funneled down all of this information into finding points that will probably work, and then points are definitely going to work. Now, eventually, of course, you want to get to the point where your hands work on automatic pilot, that you're not thinking about all these things, because this is a lot to think about. But initially, this is a really easy and simplistic funnel to work through in order to really make sure that your TCM theory is all giving you the same answer, or at least pointing you in the right direction for the most effective treatment for your patient today. Now, in this video, I didn't go over technique. Technique and tool choice is another pivotal part in traditional Japanese medicine. It is often very much affected by the style that you choose. For example, if we were doing this same treatment with Japanese meridian therapy, we would first want to treat the spleen deficiency pattern or the spleen show, perhaps a kidney show as well in combination. And then after that, we would want to treat the corresponding points on the body, which will end up looking fairly similar as in Ieyashi no Michi, which is kind of the theory that I just explained to you. Now, saying that, in traditional Japanese medicine, a foundational thought is really trying to combine all the theories that you've learned and make sure that it has a cohesive picture for you in a way and a style that makes sense for the client on the table and is, of course, effective for them. So if you're feeling that this approach might be what your practice is missing, I would love to talk with you. Let's set up a call and really find out what is getting in the way of your practice to becoming the best it possibly can be, and what you need to achieve those goals. There's a link for that in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. If you found any benefit from this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and of course share it with a practitioner that you feel it might help as well. I'm always super excited to help TCM practitioners transition and fill the gaps between their practice to get into a solid, confident, and effective traditional Japanese medicine practice. If you would like to continue your learning, please do check out this video right over here. I think it's really going to help you out.